Hello, my name is Hayden Plew. Today I will be addressing Division One college golfers and discussing the topic of resilience. How to be resilient in a Division One collegiate golfing setting. The first thing I'd like to address is what is resilience? Resilience is the ability to use personal qualities to withstand pressure. How do you personally respond to pressure? And another way to look at resilience is the ability to remain stable and have healthy levels of functioning in response to a potentially stressful event. And on the golf course, we often have many stressful events throughout a long 5 hour period, or even during 36 holes, a 10 to 12 hour period. That's the first thing that I'd like to address that makes resilience so important to a collegiate golfer. You are in a unique situation at the Division One level. Not many sports have a competition that lasts 5, 10, 12 hours. And being able to have that mental strength of resilience is going to be key to success on the golf course and success through the season, because it is a long season. You have fall tournaments and spring tournaments leading into a conference championship. There are two things that I'd like to address before I move into why resilience is so important and how we can become more resilient. And those two things I'd like to point out are, we hear often as golfers two things: grinding it out, right? Grinding. That guy or that girl is a grinder. And being mentally tough. Mentally tough, if we think of it that way, or if we have that term in our heads, it can be detrimental to our own athletic performance and our own resilience, because it's often looked as something that you have or you don't have, right? You are mentally tough or you're not mentally tough. And that is not helpful thinking, especially when we're trying to get our best athletic performance. That's why resilience is the word that we really want to look at. Resilience is a mental strength that can be developed. Even if you aren't very resilient now, you can become more resilient. And even if you already are a resilient golfer on the golf course, you can become more resilient, right? Um, the second thing, to grinding. The reason I wanted to address this is because this is also detrimental to healthy resilience. When we think of grinding, we look at it as something hasn't gone our way, so we need to lock it down, give even more effort, be even more thoughtful, and be even more careful in what we're doing in order to avoid big numbers on the golf course, in order to avoid a potentially bad shot or bad decision making situation. And while grinding can be helpful, it also can limit your abilities on the golf course. It may limit your ability to think clearly and allow yourself to perform to your full potential, which is what we want. That's what we're going for. We want our lowest scores. We want our most consistent streaks, right? We don't want to be shooting 78 one day and then 67 the next day. Part of being resilient is getting a complete and season performance, right? Throughout the season and throughout the round. So, why is resilience specifically, instead of grinding and instead of being mentally tough, why is resilience important? Well, not only do you have such a long time on the golf course typically during each competition, but you also need to be able to think clearly in new situations, because every single time you're on the golf course, you're hitting a new shot. You're never hitting the same shot twice. And you have your own strengths in your game that you need to be able to clearly think and fully commit to in order to get the best result for that shot. So resilience is really key to being able to push through those long days, push through the tough rounds, and get your best performance regardless of what has happened on one shot or one hole or even a couple holes. So let's talk about one strategy. I would like to talk about 3 activities that we can do within this video that will help you develop a resilient mindset, to be more resilient. The first thing is being able to decatastrophize a situation. Better way to put it is, don't let your thoughts snowball, your negative thoughts snowball. Let's point out some negative thoughts that we should be avoiding and that we need to recognize during a round in order to get our best performance and be resilient. End of the world thinking, right? If you have something going well for you and then you get a bad bounce or you make a bad swing, right? Something goes out of bounds in a penalty area, that kind of thing. We can't think it's over, which seems obvious, but it's sometimes tough, especially if we have high expectations. Another thing we need to avoid is second guessing. This is more common on the golf course. Second guessing. Part of being resilient is understanding your personal strength, just like the definition. You're allowing your personal qualities to withstand pressure. You need to be able to stick to your guns, right? If you pull an 8-iron out of your bag and you know that's the club, and maybe you talk with your coach, or maybe you have a thought in your head, hit the 7. No, right? We can stop that thought, and we can trust that our process and our preparation to put into it, we're not going to second guess. That's part of being resilient. Another thing to avoid is it has to be perfect, right? Because that can snowball very quickly. If golf is not a game of perfect, many of you may have even read that book, Golf is Not a Game of Perfect. If we allow ourselves to snowball perfectionist thoughts, that also doesn't allow us to be resilient. It doesn't allow for error. It doesn't allow to adapt and overcome a pressure situations or a negative situation. There's an interview that Rory McIlroy did, I think it was about 3 years ago, and he said one of the things that he was working on in his mental game was, instead of reacting to a shot, responding. And I think that perfectly encapsulates what we've just been talking about here about negative thoughts and what leads us perfectly into decatastrophizing or not snowballing is, instead of letting our emotions overcome us and dictate our thought process, what we do for the next shot, step back and understand that we're not going to let that snowball, and we're going to respond with a good thought process, a good club selection, and a good pre-shot routine into a swing. So decatastrophizing, the first thing we have to do is realize that we're letting something snowball, or that something could snowball, and stopping it. The next thing that in this exercise, the next step in decatastrophizing, is allowing ourselves to think, what's the worst case scenario? Right? Worst case scenario, you hit one out of bounds and you think, oh, now my swing's completely shot. You shank another one out of bounds and another one out of bounds. You take a 12 on the hole and then you double the next 5 holes. Right? That's a worst case scenario. That's not likely to happen, not at your level, right? Now, the next step is thinking, well, what's the best thing that could happen? Let's say you hit one out of bounds on a par 4 off the tee, you re-tee, you knock one out in the fairway, and you hole out from the fairway for par. That's a best case scenario, and that still can happen, right? So once we have those two extremes pitted against each other, now to clarify our thoughts and help us be resilient, we look at, well, what's most likely to happen, right? Which is the practice you've put in, you re-tee, you put a good swing on it, in a par 4, you knock it on the green, you give yourself a chance at a bogey putt, and if for some reason that putt doesn't go in, then the worst we walk away with is a double bogey, a par on our second ball. That is the most likely scenario. And that really, to be resilient, we have to center ourselves to overcome the pressure that we feel from that one bad swing or that one bad result, right? And that allows us to not have things snowball in our minds and snowball on the course, right? That worst case scenario. The next thing I'd like to talk about is actually a preventative measure to be more resilient. One of the things that we do, especially at high levels of golf, is we always have a game plan going into the course we're playing, right? We have club selections off the tee. We've mapped out the greens. We're looking for breaks. We're looking for specific yardages that we want into the hole. Another thing that to be resilient that and this activity that we need to do as Division One golfers in order to get our best performance athletically is visualization, and specifically visualizing how we will respond in the future to a high pressure event or a stressful situation. And this is very simple but often overlooked. It's preventative or we're preparing for the round the next day. And so what it takes is you need to close your eyes, be in a place where you can collect your thoughts and run through situations. Visualize what would happen. You tee it up, you put a swing on it, and it goes out of bounds. Okay, how do I respond? I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to go through my pre-shot routine. I'm going to tee it up. I'm going to shrug my shoulders so they're loose. I'm going to put a good swing on it and put it in play in the middle of the fairway. Deciding that that's how you're going to respond, visualizing how you're going to respond to that stressful situation. For that was an out of bounds example. It could be a hazard or a bad bounce over the green, a cart path bounce that goes heaven knows where. You can mentally prepare for that before it ever happens. And then when you get on the course, you already have a plan of action. You've already determined that you're not going to overreact, that you're not going to swing out of your shoes on the next one, right? That you're going to collect yourself. And it gives you the best opportunity to get your best performance after that stressful situation. So we've gone over decatastrophizing. We've gone over visualizing before the round what we're going to do, how we're going to respond to a stressful situation. And the third thing I want to talk about, again, is preparation and what we need to focus on during the round. So what I'd like you to do, take out a piece of paper, and on that piece of paper, draw a circle, a pretty big circle. I'll give you a couple seconds to do that. Okay. Now, inside that circle, I want you to write down everything that you control during a golf round. Everything that you are in control of as the athlete, as the individual. I'll give you 30 seconds to do that. Okay. And I encourage you to return later if you have anything else that you'd like to add to the center of that circle, what you are in control of, that you go back and you fill that in. Now, outside of the circle, I would like you to write down everything that is not in your control during a golf round. I'll give you another 30 seconds to write that down. Okay. To be resilient, we have to, especially as golfers, have to realize what we can control and have that be our focus and return our focus to those things. Golf is, again, very unique because it is played outdoors. There's a lot of stuff we don't control. We don't control the weather, the wind, the rain, lightning, right? We cannot control we can't control nature, right? whether it's animals, whether it's trees, right? The lie we draw, right? We can't control our lie. Once the ball hits the ground, it's out of our control. We can't control, and I think this one's very important, and I'd like to address this. We can't control our competitors. This isn't like basketball. We can't guard the people we're playing against. This isn't like football. We can't go tackle someone if they're playing well, right? We are only in control of what we do. And in order to be resilient and get a consistent performance every single round, once we realize that there might be a negative thought or a pressure situation or a stressful situation on the golf course, maybe we hit it under some trees, maybe we missed a 3-footer, right? Maybe our competitor has caught a heater and they are now 3 birdies, four birdies in a row, right? To be resilient, we have to go back to that circle of what we control, right? Which is we control our physical swing, we control our thoughts, right? We control what equipment we play with, we control our club selection, right? Oftentimes we control the ball flight. We control whether we're hitting a draw or whether we're hitting a cut, what we decide to do physically before the ball lands, right? And bringing our focus back to what we control every single shot allows us to get the best performance out of ourselves and be resilient. I'd like to give another example of this to close and really put it into perspective what focusing on what we control really helps. Let's say you hit it under some trees and you have to decide where you're going or what kind of shot you're playing after that. What we often hear is play the high percentage shot, which is really good thinking to be resilient. But playing the high percentage shot also means playing to your strengths, right? Putting the club in your hand that allows you to get the most out of whatever shot you have to play next, right? Don't hit in order to be resilient, and going back to our definition at the beginning, using personal qualities to withstand pressure, right? Part of your personal qualities are it's the shots and the practice that you've put in beforehand that will allow you to get the most out of your round in that moment. Don't hit the shot that Phil would hit. Don't hit the shot that Annika Sorenstam would hit, or Lexi Thompson, or whoever. Don't hit the shot that Rory would hit. Hit the shot that you specifically have the most control over, and trust it, right? To be resilient, use your personal qualities and your skill sets to overcome those stressful situations. If the punch shot's the best play, let's do that. If hitting a low hook is the best play because that's in your bag and that's what you feel comfortable with, we're going to do that, right? And doing this every shot allows us to put our best shot forward every single time, and that allows us to collectively put good rounds together and avoid the bad holes, avoid stringing bogeys together. It allows us to be resilient. I hope that these 3 things have helped. I hope that you have a better idea of what resilience is and why it is so important to our sport. And I hope to see that your scores are better and improving in the future. Thank you.